Daniel adjusted the strap of his worn backpack as he guided his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, through the crowded lobby of the community center. His steps were heavy, his eyes shadowed by exhaustion, but the small hand clinging to his gave him the strength to keep moving forward. He had promised her they would come to the free storytelling event tonight, even though his body begged for rest after another long day working double shifts. The air inside buzzed with chatter, the scent of popcorn and crayons mixing in a strangely comforting way, and rows of folding chairs were already filling with families. Daniel scanned the room nervously, worried they'd have to stand, when he spotted a single empty chair at the far end of the back row. Relief flickered across his tired face until he noticed that no one else was sitting nearby. Only one young woman occupied that side of the row, dressed simply in a modest blue dress, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze distant. Though the hall brimmed with life, there was a subtle invisible wall around her, as if people had made a choice to avoid sitting too close. Daniel almost hesitated, unsure whether he should approach, but Lily tugged on his arm, urging him forward with the innocent eagerness only a child carried. "Daddy, look, there's a seat," she whispered. He gave a small nod and walked toward the empty chair. The woman looked up as they approached, startled, her eyes wide and uncertain, but Daniel only offered her a tired, polite smile. "Excuse me," he murmured softly, and without waiting for rejection, he settled into the chair, lifting Lily onto his lap. For a moment the world seemed to still. The woman blinked at him as though she hadn't expected anyone to dare sit beside her. She gave a faint, almost hesitant smile in return, and Daniel felt a strange warmth in his chest. He couldn't explain why, but sitting next to her felt oddly natural, as though this was exactly where he belonged. Around them, the storyteller at the front launched into a colorful tale that had the children giggling, and Lily leaned forward in delight, clapping her little hands, her laughter ringing like music. Daniel should have been focused on her joy, but his gaze kept flickering sideways, catching glimpses of the woman's profile, the calm strength in her features, and the quiet sadness in her eyes that no one else seemed to notice. There was something about her presence that unsettled and intrigued him all at once, as though fate had guided him to this very chair. He brushed the thought aside quickly. After all, he was just a struggling dad doing his best to give his daughter moments of happiness despite their hardships. But deep down, a voice whispered that this night, this choice, and this seat were not accidents at all. The storytelling session ended with applause and cheers, children rushing to the front to thank the performer while parents gathered their belongings. But Daniel lingered in his seat, watching Lily wave enthusiastically at the storyteller before turning to beam at the woman beside them. "Did you like the story too?" Lily asked with the bright curiosity that only a child could have. The woman blinked, startled by the attention, then softened as she nodded. "Yes, it was wonderful," she replied, her voice low and melodic, carrying a kindness that instantly put Lily at ease. Daniel, sensing Lily's openness, gave a polite nod. "I'm Daniel," he introduced himself awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. "And this chatterbox is my daughter, Lily." The woman smiled faintly, her lips curving into the kind of smile that looked as though it hadn't been used much lately. "Clara," she said simply. For a moment there was silence between them, the noise of the crowd a blur in the background, and Daniel wondered why people had avoided sitting near her. She didn't seem unfriendly. If anything, she seemed lonely. As the room emptied, Clara remained, folding her hands in her lap as though unsure whether to leave, and Daniel felt compelled to stay as well. Lily tugged on Clara's sleeve, showing her a crayon drawing she had made during the story. Clara leaned closer, her eyes lighting up as she admired it with genuine enthusiasm, praising Lily's creativity until the girl blushed with pride. Daniel watched, struck by how natural the exchange seemed, how Clara's gentleness slipped through the walls she seemed to carry. Eventually, Clara glanced at Daniel and murmured, "Most people don't sit by me. I think they feel uncomfortable. Maybe I give off the wrong impression." Her words were casual, but there was an H behind them. Daniel frowned, shaking his head. Or maybe they're just not brave enough. People miss out when they judge too quickly. Clara looked him then, really looked at him, and something in her eyes shifted, like a door unlocking. She smiled again, softer this time, and whispered, "Thank you." They spoke for a few minutes longer, about little things. The books Clara liked, the silly jokes Lily told, the weather outside. But beneath the ordinary words was a growing thread of connection, invisible yet undeniable. Daniel didn't know it, but Clara had noticed him weeks ago in the park, laughing with Lily even as his clothes showed wear and his shoes looked tired. She had been drawn to the quiet strength he carried, the way he poured love into his daughter despite his struggles. Tonight, when fate placed him in the empty seat beside her, she had felt her heart skip in recognition. He thought he was just being polite, just taking the only available chair, but Clara knew better. She had been waiting, not for the story, not for the crowd, but for him. In the weeks that followed, Daniel found himself bumping into Clara more often than coincidence should have allowed, though he was too humble and distracted by survival to question it. She began stopping by the small diner where he worked late shifts, sliding into a booth with a book in her hand, sometimes ordering a slice of pie just to keep him company during slow hours. Other times she appeared at the park where Lily played after school, always carrying something thoughtful, a coloring book, a packet of crayons, or a small bag of Lily's favorite candy. Daniel wrestled with guilt over accepting her kindness, worrying that he looked like a charity case, but Clara never made him feel lesser. She listened to his stories, laughed at his dry humor, and reminded him through simple gestures that someone saw him beyond the uniform of a struggling man. Yet even as warmth grew between them, Daniel sensed she was holding something back. There were moments when her gaze drifted into distance, her words faltered, and a shadow of fear flickered across her face. One evening, as the autumn air cooled and leaves scattered across the sidewalk, Clara walked with Daniel and Lily to their tiny apartment building. Lily skipped ahead, humming to herself, leaving the two of them trailing in quieter steps. Clara paused at the foot of the stairs, turning to face Daniel with an expression that looked torn by dread and determination. "There's something you don't know about me," she began softly, her voice trembling in a way Daniel had never heard before. He blinked, confused, but nodded for her to continue. Clara drew in a breath as though gathering courage. "I'm not just Clara," she confessed. "My family, they own one of the largest companies in the city. I'm a billionaire's daughter. I've grown up with wealth and privilege, but I've never wanted to be judged for it, never wanted people to see me as money instead of a person. That's why I come here, why I go unnoticed. I wanted someone who would sit beside me without knowing, someone who saw me first, not what I have." Daniel's mind reeled, his world spinning in disbelief. He looked at her plain dress, her simple manners, and realized she had gone to great lengths to live outside the shadow of her last name. His first instinct was to pull back, to tell her their worlds were too far apart, but then his eyes drifted to Lily, who was laughing with Clara, as though she'd always belonged in their little circle. Clara wasn't pitying him, she wasn't trying to buy her way into their lives. She had chosen to be there, to stay close, to sit in the empty seat when no one else would. And in that moment, Daniel understood that her secret didn't change who she was. It only revealed the depth of her longing, to be seen, to be chosen, to be loved for herself. After Clara's confession, Daniel found himself caught in a storm of doubt and wonder, torn between fear of inadequacy and the undeniable bond that had quietly woven itself between them. For days he tried to convince himself to keep his distance, to remind himself that a billionaire's daughter had no place in the humble, fragile world of a struggling single father scraping by with late, night diner shifts and second-hand clothes. Yet Clara never pulled away. Instead, she drew closer, showing up at moments he least expected and most needed. When Lily caught a sudden fever that sent Daniel into a panic, it was Clara who rushed them to the city's best hospital, her presence steady as a rock while doctors worked. Daniel sat slumped in the waiting room, his hands trembling with fear, but Clara sat beside him, slipping her hand into his, reminding him through her quiet strength that he wasn't alone. "Remember that night?" she whispered softly, her voice soothing. "When you sat beside me, not knowing why no one else would. You filled a seat in my life that had been empty for so long, Daniel. And I knew then. I had been waiting for you." Her words struck him deeper than he expected, unraveling the walls of pride and fear he had built around himself. He realized it hadn't mattered that she came from wealth, nor that he came from struggle. What mattered was that they had both been searching for someone to see them, truly see them. When Lily was finally discharged, Clara stayed by her side as naturally as if she had always belonged in their family. Days turned into weeks, and what began as chance encounters grew into a rhythm of companionship, laughter, and tender moments that filled the spaces of Daniel's weary life with hope. One crisp afternoon, as the three of them watched Lily play in the park beneath the golden glow of autumn leaves, Clara turned to Daniel, her eyes shimmering with the same quiet courage she had shown the night she revealed her truth. "You think you chose that seat in the hall, but I don't believe it was an accident," she murmured. "It was always meant for you." Daniel's throat tightened, emotions flooding him, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe in a future that wasn't defined by struggle alone. He reached for her hand, their fingers interlacing as Lily ran back to them with a wide smile, and he realized that family wasn't about what you had or didn't have. It was about who chose to sit beside you when no one else would. And in that moment, beneath the rustling trees and the sound of his daughter's laughter, Daniel knew he wasn't just a struggling dad anymore. He was a man who had found love, belonging, and a seat that had always been waiting for him.